Hello YouTube, this is Sam Gerrans from Qur'an.com. Today is Monday the 28th of February 2022, and I thought I'd make a few comments about what's going on in Ukraine, or perhaps the bigger picture. The reason being, partly, I live in Russia. My background was in Russian. I speak Russian fluently, and I think my point of view might have some interest for certain people. So anyway, here goes. Firstly, despite what's you're being told in the West, and I have to preface this by saying I'm not like a beating my chest Russophile or anything like that. I could make long videos about all the things that are wrong about living in Russia. Russia's got plenty of problems. Believe me, ask any Russian, they'll tell you all about them. So it's not about that. It's not about Holy Russia or anything like that. But here we are. There's a context to this thing. What's going on in Ukraine has a context. And I'm going to put a link to a university professor who lays out that context. He's a bit naive in some ways, but he certainly hasn't got a drum to bang for Russia or anything like that. But in 2015, he laid out fairly succinctly the actual situation. So this is 7 years old. Watch that, and then you'll have some understanding of the context. There is a context, and I'm not going to get drawn into that too much, but there is one, believe me, and Russia has at least in terms of its international presentation of its grievances, most definitely has a point. So just to say that. What's interesting to me is the complete mental lockstep that you see in the Western presentation. Now, we've just come out of 2 years of complete media lockstep as regards what they want you to inject into your bodies. And now there is total lockstep. It doesn't matter which media outlet that you look at. It's, CNN, Fox, BBC, Daily Mail, the so-called Guardian, all the rest of it. It doesn't make any difference. They all agree upon the main thing, which is Russia is bad or mad or just evil, and all attempts to stop Russia are justified. There's just nothing that Russia has no point in anything that it's saying. Now, what that says to me is that this is really just a continuation of the COVID, which has just disappeared, right? I mean, 5 minutes ago, people were shopping their neighbours for, coughing or not wearing a mask in the street, and now they're all beating their chests because Ukraine is such a wonderful country, a country they probably couldn't find on a map. I mean, Ukrainian people, I've known a lot of Ukrainians. In fact, my wife is half Ukrainian, so it's not like everybody hates Ukrainians here or anything like that. But just for context, Ukraine and Russia go back. They go back to what was called the Krещение Древней Руси in the 8th century. You've got the kind of the Kiev Rus. So they go back as far as England and Wales. And in fact, I think England and Wales that's a fairly good analogy. Now, I don't want to get drawn into the politics of it, who's right or who's wrong. Specifically, what I'm much more interested in is the way that this is being treated in the West. The way the West is treating this, they're treating Russia in a sort of psychopathic way, completely disregarding every single point that Russia's making, that that Putin's made, that Lavrov has made, and so on. I've listened to Putin's speeches. Without translation, just listen to it. And you see how those are presented in the West, that this long rambling speeches, and they're not rambling speeches, they're history lessons. He knows precisely what he's doing and why. Now, whether he's a good or bad or an indifferent man is neither here nor there. My own personal view, Russia and the West are joined at the hip. I don't see a huge amount of difference. They're both utterly controlled by the New World Order, in my view. They're completely materialistic societies. They're based upon usury, all the normal stuff. I don't see any difference between them, except that the West is far further down on the conveyor belt of perversion and disgustingness. But you can be sure all of that's coming here. It already is. So it's not that there is any real difference. It's just they're just being used for the same agenda, in my view. The media lockstep has been absolutely stunning. Now, usually there is some sort of debate or some sort of antithesis in the conversation that you get in Western media. Here there is absolutely none whatsoever. I've seen two people make some sort of statements that weren't totally in lockstep. One was Nigel Farage, who said once that there is a context to this and then shut his mouth, and the other was Donald Trump. The next point, I want to get through these quite quickly, is the West hasn't really got any idea what it's fighting for. So what it's saying is these are liberal values. Well, you should know, if you don't, that the Ukrainian government has been foisting upon the Ukrainian people a policy which Putin correctly says is Nazi. It is a fascistic ideology, and it's also one based around ethnic cleansing of people who are Ukrainian citizens, and there are millions of these people. So that's what you're supporting. But really, the only thing that they managed to come up with in the West, they're supporting liberal values. So if you're beating your chest for Ukraine and how wonderful it all is, then what you're fighting for is non-binary toilets, okay, and handing your children over to the sodomite. The last point is that this is a war against everybody. If people who live in the West think that this isn't against them every bit as much as what has been going on the last 2 years is against them, they're just living in a dream world. They're naive. The people in the West, firstly, you're going to have mass immigration, even more of it, like you didn't, have enough of it already. So that's coming to you, which is going to, and a lot of Ukrainians are good people, but you can be certain that in amongst those groups, there are going to be embedded all kinds of other people that you wouldn't want in your country, wouldn't normally allow into your country. First thing. Second thing, people are going to start dumping the dollar, and that's all that America has. America only has the dollar. Once enough people dump it, that's the end of America. Look what I'm not a party politician here, but look what the American political class has done to America in the last 40, 50 years. They're destroying it, and the best way to finish it off is to do this, in my view. So I see this as a continuation of what we've had over the last 2-3 years with the COVID thing, and going back 50, 100 years prior to that, because this whole thing has got a history. So when you're paying, $10, $15 at the pump for petrol, for gas, when everything is going to cost a ton more, when country after country quietly decides, it's too expensive to use dollars now, we're going to start shifting to the Chinese yuan or whatever it is, then this will be the thing that you should keep in mind. This isn't just a war against Ukraine. It isn't just a war against Russia. It's a war against you. And lastly, just consider the lockstep that the media has been in. There hasn't been any discussion of any of Russia's points, not ever in any of this. So just ask yourself why. And I do recommend watching the video below. This university professor, he's a bit naive in some ways, but he has some concept of the bigger picture, and he lays out that Russia has, and this is in 2015 that he made this video. For the last, actually in 2014, the Minsk agreement, over that period of 7 or 8 years, Russia has tried every single diplomatic route possible to try to get something happening here, and the West has just prodded him and said no. And at the same time, let's just be clear, they have destroyed country after country after country. But when Russia hasn't invaded Texas, it's trying to defend its own borders, and it knows that this war was coming anyway. It's just trying to keep it as far away from home as possible. And the only way that the Western presentation works is that you're mad or bad. You prod Russia over and over and over and over and over again eventually there'll be a response. Well, this is the response. Now, obviously, in the Western media, it's very hard to tell what's going on in Ukraine. But, you can be certain that, of course, innocent people will be suffering and all the rest of it. But unfortunately, that's what that's the price you pay. This will becoming, I would imagine, either hot war, cold war, whatever it is going to be, further into Russia as well. But it's always been here. They've had the NGOs here forever. The George Soros, organizations pushing all of their filth and disgustingness. So it's at least, I think, if you want my take on it, I think a lot of Russians, obviously some are horrified and think it's all terrible, but a lot don't. A lot think at least now we can call things what they are. If you speak Russian, or even if you don't, I'll put a link, if I can find it, down below, to Lavrov, who's an extremely intelligent man dealing with these, I guess they're sort of minor alphabet spaghetti sort of intelligence agencies sort of representatives, but they're called journalists. It's laughingly called journalists, and answering their questions and just sort of explaining to them why this is going on. Ask yourself why you didn't know any of the stuff that these people are talking about. And this university professor, he's not a Russian stooge. He's not working for Russia Today or anything like that. He's a bit of a naive guy, if you want my take on it. His sort of view of real politics pretty narrow, but nevertheless, he manages, even despite himself, to say some truth. I've taken a copy of this. I've saved this to my hard drive, this particular video, because this will disappear, because he actually explains what the problems and the backstory are. Now, this is nothing. As I say, my wife is she's half Russian, half Ukrainian, and you'll find lots of people in Russia and in Ukraine where this is the case. This is one cultural base, and what they're doing here is very clever, if you want my view of it. How far Russia is part of this, I don't know. You can my view. It's one system. It's one usury based system. I haven't seen any sort of difference in the way that Russia has pushed the COVID thing. In my view, it's one system. I'm not here beating my chest for Mother Russia or anything like that. Definitely not. But you have to. If your children are going to die for this, or if they really have decided to push this to a point where they're using nuclear weapons and so on, then you may as well know that this thing is a lie, and they've pushed Russia to a point where it had absolutely no choice but to defend itself in some ways. And you should also know that Russia has, and this is just a matter of fact, pursued a policy of diplomacy over years, and actually had, the Minsk Accord. They have an agreement which agreed to safeguard the rights of the Russian-speaking minorities in Ukraine and so on. And if this had been any other country, or this, the West would have been, crying the other way. It's not that I'm surprised that the West is completely hypocritical. It's not that. It's not that, we're not used to the Western powers murdering people. Normally they're brown people, but they did make an exception in the case of Yugoslavia. But now they're crying their crocodile tears over the Ukrainian fascists, which is what they actually are, the people who are in power at least, or temporarily in power. Russia's got absolutely no choice. If you prod a bear long enough, it will respond, and now it's responded. Everybody's in horror. But understand, this is against you too. Okay, there's going to be mass immigration into all these other countries, and who knows who are going to be part of these. People are going to be expedited into these countries. It's going to push the price of everything through the roof. It's going to justify further lockdowns. And remember now, the whole infrastructure is there. further breakdown of Western society. All these wars are against you too. I get messages all the time. Oh, I hope you're okay. You know, blah, blah, blah. You're in Russia. I hope you're all right. Well, I hope you're all right too. Because this war is against you, every bit. Well, I don't mean you personally, but against, you know, where you are. Every bit as it is against me and where I am. It's just one war. If you haven't got that yet, I'm very sorry for you. Anyway, that's my take on it. I hope everyone's well, and that's all for now. If you're listening on YouTube, you can download my full translation of the Qur'an and all other work free using the button in the top right-hand corner, or buy the hard copy there at 10% less than on Amazon. You can download the audio from my YouTube videos to your mobile device using the links in the drop-down below. I recommend meetquranites.com to connect with other Qur'an-alone believers. Like if you like, comment if you have something constructive to say, and subscribe to get more each week. And use the link in the drop-down below to donate if you would like to help me keep doing this. And remember, this life is short. Eternity is long. If you want good trees, plant good seeds.